BYD just overtook Tesla as the world's best-selling electric vehicle company, and most people never saw it coming. In the fourth quarter of 2023, BYD sold more electric vehicles globally than Tesla. That's roughly 1.5 million more EVs sold by BYD over Tesla across that full year. You heard that right. A company most people in the West couldn't name a year ago just dethroned the most hyped automaker in history. This isn't a story about luck. It's a story about batteries, billions in government backing, and a decades-long plan that Tesla and, frankly, the entire Western auto industry completely underestimated. And it starts not in a flashy Silicon Valley garage, but in a modest factory in Shenzhen, China in 1995. Built on batteries, not cars. Picture this. It's 1995. Tesla doesn't exist yet. The Prius hasn't been invented. And a 29-year-old chemist named Wang Chuanfu just borrowed the equivalent of $300,000 from a cousin to start a battery company in Shenzhen, China. No one was watching. No one cared. BYD Build Your Dreams started making rechargeable batteries for consumer electronics, Nokia, Motorola, the phones in people's pockets. While the rest of the world was obsessing over the internet boom, Wang was obsessing over one thing: energy storage. How you capture it, how you hold it, and how you release it as efficiently as possible. That obsession would become the most valuable competitive advantage in the history of the auto industry. But here's what made BYD different from every car company that came after it. BYD never started as a car company. It started as a battery company that decided to build cars. That distinction sounds small. It isn't. While legacy automakers scrambled to understand battery chemistry decades later, BYD had already spent years living inside it. They didn't need to partner with battery suppliers. They didn't need to negotiate contracts or depend on anyone else's technology. They were the technology. In 2003, BYD acquired a failing state-owned automaker for roughly $75 million. Most analysts laughed. A battery manufacturer buying a broken car company? It looked desperate. It looked reckless. It was neither. Wang Chuanfu wasn't buying a car brand. He was buying a factory floor, a distribution license, and a launch pad. He already had the most critical piece of the puzzle that every other automaker was still trying to figure out. He had the battery. And while the world kept waiting for someone in Silicon Valley or Detroit or Stuttgart to solve the EV equation, Wang had already solved the hardest part years before anyone thought to ask him. But building the technology was only half the battle. Getting the world to believe in it that was an entirely different war. Warren Buffett's billion-dollar bet. It's 2008. The global financial crisis is gutting markets worldwide. Banks are collapsing. Investors are running for safety. And Warren Buffett, the most celebrated value investor alive, is wiring $232 million to a Chinese electric vehicle company that most Americans had never heard of. The financial press thought he'd lost his mind. Buffett's partner, Charlie Munger, had pushed the investment hard. Munger called Wang Chuanfu, a combination of Thomas Edison and Jack Welch, someone who could both imagine a technological future and build the industrial machine to deliver it. That wasn't flattery. That was a thesis, and Buffett trusted it enough to buy roughly 10% of BYD on the spot. Here's why that moment matters more than most people realize. Buffett doesn't invest in hype. He invests in durable competitive advantages, things that are genuinely hard to replicate. When he looked at BYD, he didn't see a car company. He saw a vertically integrated energy company with a manufacturing discipline that Western automakers hadn't built in decades. His stamp of approval didn't just bring capital, it brought credibility on a global stage at exactly the moment BYD needed the world to start paying attention. That $232 million bet would eventually grow to over $1 billion in value. You heard that right. Buffett made more than 4 times his money on a Chinese EV company that Wall Street dismissed as a novelty. But even with Buffett's backing, BYD still faced a problem no investor could solve. To truly dominate, it needed a home market large enough to scale at a speed no Western competitor could match. And that's exactly what China handed it. The government at BYD's back. Imagine the government of your country deciding by policy, by law, by sheer political will that electric vehicles are the future, and then spending hundreds of billions of dollars to make sure that future arrives on their terms. That's exactly what China did. Starting in the early 2010s, Beijing rolled out one of the most aggressive industrial support programs in modern history. EV buyers received direct purchase subsidies worth thousands of dollars. In major cities like Beijing and Shanghai, where gas-powered car license plates were being rationed through lotteries that took years to win, EV license plates were handed out freely. If you wanted to drive in China's biggest cities without waiting a decade, buying electric wasn't just smart, it was the only logical choice. But the support went deeper than subsidies. The Chinese government directed state-owned enterprises to purchase EVs for their fleets. It built out a national charging infrastructure at a pace that made Western efforts look amateur. It structured trade policy to protect domestic manufacturers while they scaled. And it funneled research funding into battery technology, semiconductor development, and EV manufacturing at a level that no private company could match alone. BYD didn't just benefit from this environment, it was architected for it. Wang Chuanfu understood that in China, aligning your company's mission with the state's strategic priorities wasn't just politically smart, it was a business model. BYD's growth and China's EV ambitions became inseparable. Tesla could build a gigafactory in Shanghai. It could hire Chinese workers and sell to Chinese consumers, but it could never be a Chinese national champion. And in a market shaped this deliberately by government policy, that distinction was worth more than any product advantage. The result? China became the largest EV market on Earth, and BYD sat at the very center of it, growing faster than any car company in history. But government support at a massive home market only explained part of the story. Because while other automakers were celebrating their EV announcements, BYD was quietly building a weapon that would make their cost structures completely obsolete. Vertical integration, BYD's secret weapon. Here's something that sounds boring, until you realize it explains everything. BYD makes its own batteries, its own chips, its own electric motors, its own powertrains. And it assembles the final vehicle in its own factories, with materials sourced as close to the ground as possible. Every single link in the chain owned by BYD. While Tesla was signing contracts with CATL for battery supply, while Ford was scrambling to secure lithium agreements, while every legacy automaker was piecing together a global supply chain from dozens of outside vendors, BYD had already built the entire machine in-house. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't make headlines, but it was an industrial fortress. Then COVID hit, and the world found out exactly how fragile everyone else's supply chain actually was. In 2021 and 2022, the global semiconductor shortage crippled the auto industry. Ford lost billions in revenue. GM shut down plants. Tesla delayed deliveries and watched its wait times balloon. The companies that had optimized for efficiency by outsourcing critical components suddenly discovered that efficiency without resilience is just fragility with better marketing. BYD? It kept building. Because BYD Semiconductor, its own chip division, was already supplying a significant portion of its in-house needs. Not perfect, but protected in a way no Western automaker could claim. The cost advantages compounded over time in ways that were almost unfair. When you don't pay a battery supplier's margin, a chip supplier's margin, and a powertrain supplier's margin on every single vehicle, your cost per unit drops faster than any competitor running a traditional supply chain can match. BYD was able to price vehicles aggressively, not because it was sacrificing profit, but because it had structurally eliminated costs that its rivals were still paying. This was the quiet engine behind BYD's rise. Not marketing, not branding, not a charismatic CEO on social media. Just an obsessive, unglamorous, years-long commitment to owning every piece of the puzzle. But owning the supply chain was only half of it, because none of that matters if the product itself doesn't earn the customer's trust. And in 2020, BYD released the thing that finally forced the world to stop underestimating it. The Blade battery changes everything. It's 2020. The world is locked down, and quietly, In the middle of a global pandemic, BYD unveils something that changes the entire conversation around Chinese electric vehicles: the Blade battery. For years, the knock on Chinese EVs was simple and devastating. They catch fire. Thermal runaway events in lithium-ion battery packs had become a genuine consumer fear, and that fear was holding BYD back in every market outside China. The stigma was real, the hesitation was real, and BYD knew it. The Blade battery was their answer. Built on lithium iron phosphate chemistry, LFP, it was engineered as a long, flat cell that slotted directly into the structural frame of the vehicle itself. No bulky protective module around it. No excess weight, just an elegantly simple design that was structurally stronger, thermally safer, and cheaper to produce than the battery packs Tesla and its rivals were using. Then BYD did something bold. They took a fully charged Blade battery pack, drove a nail through it, and filmed the whole thing. The pack didn't catch fire. It didn't explode. The surface temperature barely moved. You heard that right, a nail driven straight through a fully charged battery pack. And nothing happened. That video circulated across the industry like a shockwave. Engineers at rival companies watched it in disbelief because it wasn't just a marketing stunt. The underlying chemistry was genuinely superior for safety and thermal stability at scale. Overnight, the narrative shifted. BYD wasn't the cheap alternative anymore. It was the safe one, the technically credible one. Consumer confidence in China surged. Fleet buyers took notice. And BYD's sales numbers began climbing at a pace that made competitors deeply uncomfortable. But the Blade battery was only the foundation, because once BYD proved it could build a better battery, the next question was obvious. Could it build a better car? A premium car? One that went head-to-head with Tesla's flagship on design, range, and desirability. The answer came with a sedan that shocked the entire Chinese market. The Han sedan BYD goes premium. Up until 2020, if you said BYD to a car enthusiast anywhere outside China, you'd get a blank stare or a polite laugh. BYD made affordable EVs for the Chinese mass market. Practical, sensible, uninspiring. That was the reputation, and it stuck. Then the Han arrived, and the laugh stopped. The BYD Han was a full-size luxury electric sedan, long, low, genuinely beautiful, with a range of over 370 miles on a single charge. It accelerated to 60 miles per hour in 3.5 seconds. It had a premium interior with a rotating center screen, driver assistance technology, and refinement that put it comfortably in the luxury segment by any objective measure. And it started at roughly $27,000. You heard that right, a legitimate luxury performance sedan, priced closer to a Honda Accord than a Tesla Model S. The tension in the market was immediate. Tesla's Model S, BYD's clearest rival in terms of performance and positioning, was selling in China for over $70,000 at the time. BYD wasn't just competing with Tesla, it was making Tesla's pricing look indefensible to Chinese consumers who suddenly had a premium alternative at less than half the cost. The Han became BYD's fastest-selling model almost immediately after launch. Chinese consumers who had been saving for a Tesla started cross-shopping in a way they never had before. And many of them chose the Han not as a compromise, but as a preference. This was the moment BYD stopped playing defense. It was no longer the budget option hoping to capture buyers who couldn't afford a Tesla. It was a direct challenger, on equal aesthetic and technological ground, priced in a way that Tesla simply could not match without gutting its own margins. BYD had proven it could build batteries better. Now it had proven it could build cars that people actually wanted. But while BYD was ascending, something else was happening on the other side of the story. Tesla, the company everyone assumed was untouchable in China, was starting to crack. Tesla's China problem. Tesla's decision to build a gigafactory in Shanghai was, at the time, considered a masterstroke. Local production meant lower costs, faster delivery, and a direct foothold in the world's largest EV market. Tesla's China sales exploded. By 2021, Shanghai was producing more vehicles than Fremont. It looked unstoppable. But this was just the beginning of Tesla's nightmare in China. The first cracks came from nationalism. As Chinese consumers grew increasingly proud of homegrown technology, and as BYD's quality began matching or exceeding Tesla's in key areas, the cultural calculus shifted. Buying a Tesla started feeling, to a growing segment of Chinese buyers, like buying American in a market that was increasingly proud of building better at home. Social media in China turned on Tesla in ways that were swift and unforgiving. Then came the government pressure. Chinese military and government facilities began banning Tesla vehicles from their premises, citing data security concerns over the cameras and sensors embedded in every Tesla. That ban sent a signal that rippled far beyond government parking lots. It told the broader market that Tesla carried political risk that a domestic brand simply didn't. Then came the most devastating blow of all: Elon Musk himself. Musk's acquisition of Twitter, his increasingly polarizing political statements, and his growing association with far-right movements in the United States and Europe created a brand liability that no product update could fix. In Europe, a market Tesla desperately needed showrooms reported direct confrontations, vandalism, and consumers publicly walking away from Tesla purchases specifically because of Musk's public persona. Sales in Germany, France, and the United Kingdom dropped sharply through 2024 and into 2025. Tesla wasn't collapsing, but its ceiling had been found. And the most dangerous part wasn't the customers it was losing today, it was the customers it was never going to win back. And it wasn't just Tesla that was falling apart. The entire Western auto industry was watching BYD pack its bags and prepare to take the fight global. BYD goes global. For most of its history, BYD was a Chinese story. A remarkable one, but a domestic one. The vast majority of its sales happened inside China, protected by government policy, fueled by a home market that no foreign competitor could fully penetrate. Critics use this to dismiss BYD's rise as artificial. A greenhouse flower, they said. It couldn't survive in the real world. Then BYD walked out of the greenhouse. Starting in 2022 and accelerating hard through 2023 and 2024, BYD launched a coordinated international expansion that was anything but accidental. Europe first, Norway, Germany, the United Kingdom, Sweden. Then Southeast Asia, where Thailand became a regional beachhead with BYD capturing the #1 EV sales position almost immediately after entry. Then Latin America, with Brazil and Mexico emerging as high-growth targets where affordable EVs had an enormous untapped market. But here's what made BYD's global push genuinely dangerous to every competitor watching. BYD didn't just export cars. It built local assembly plants in Brazil, Hungary, and Thailand specifically to sidestep the import tariffs that the European Union and other governments were desperately throwing up to slow it down. The EU slapped tariffs as high as 35% on Chinese-made EVs. BYD responded by simply moving production closer to the customer. You heard that right. When the West tried to wall BYD out with tariffs, BYD walked around the wall and built a factory on the other side. The price advantage in every market it entered was staggering. BYD's Seal sedan, a direct Tesla Model 3 competitor, landed in Europe priced roughly 30 to 40% below its rival. Quality that European consumers acknowledged as genuine, technology that independent reviewers scored competitively, and a price tag that made the decision almost uncomfortable in its simplicity. The Western auto industry had spent years assuming the Chinese EV threat was a future problem. Somewhere around 2023, they looked up and realized the future had already arrived in their showrooms. But none of the global expansion would mean anything without the moment that made it all official. The moment the scoreboard changed forever. The scoreboard, BYD wins. For years, Tesla's position at the top of the global EV sales chart felt permanent. It had the brand, it had the software, it had the supercharger network. It had Elon Musk's gravitational pull on media attention and consumer imagination. Every quarter, the numbers came out, and Tesla was still #1. The lead felt safe. It felt structural. Then came the fourth quarter of 2023. BYD sold 1.86 million battery electric vehicles globally in 2023. Tesla sold 1.8 million. For the first time in the modern EV era, Tesla was not the world's best-selling electric vehicle company. You heard that right. The company that invented the modern EV era had been overtaken. Not by a legacy automaker with a century of history. Not by a Silicon Valley challenger with billions in venture backing. By a battery company from Shenzhen that Warren Buffett believed in before almost anyone else did. And it wasn't a fluke. Through 2024, BYD's lead widened. Its model lineup expanded aggressively across every price segment from the Seagull, an entry-level EV priced under $10,000 in China, all the way up to the Yangwang U8, a luxury SUV pushing toward $150,000. BYD wasn't winning in one lane. It was winning in every lane simultaneously. The revenue numbers told the same story. BYD's total vehicle revenue surpassed Tesla's for the first time in 2024, a milestone that would have seemed like pure fantasy just 3 years earlier. Tesla retained real strengths. Its software and autonomy ambitions remained ahead of the field. Its supercharger network was still the gold standard. Its brand loyalty in North America remained fierce. But in the global race, the one that determines who shapes the future of transportation for billions of people across dozens of markets, BYD had taken the lead. And the most unsettling part for Tesla? BYD was just getting started. The shift that changes everything. Step back for a moment, because if you've been watching this story as a rivalry between two car companies, you've been looking at it too small. What just happened with BYD and Tesla isn't a business story. It's a civilizational one, and the full weight of it hasn't landed yet for most people in the West, but it will. Think about what happened to the American auto industry in the 1970s and 80s. Japan showed up with smaller, more fuel-efficient, more reliable cars at prices Detroit couldn't match. The American auto industry laughed first. Then, it panicked. Then, it spent the next 3 decades trying to claw back ground it never fully recovered. Honda, Toyota, and Nissan didn't just win market share. They permanently rewired who the world trusted to build cars. An entire generation of consumers grew up assuming Japanese engineering was simply better. That perception hardened into reality, and Detroit never fully escaped it. BYD is doing that again, right now, in real time, except the stakes are significantly higher. Because this time, it isn't just cars. China has built an entire industrial ecosystem designed to dominate the global energy transition from the ground-up batteries, semiconductors, solar panels, grid-scale energy storage, and the raw material supply chains that feed all of it. BYD is the most visible face of that ecosystem, but it is far from the only player. Behind BYD stands CATL, the world's largest battery manufacturer. Behind that stands China's control over the majority of the world's lithium refining capacity. This wasn't an accident. It was a strategy executed over decades, while the West was busy debating whether EVs were even a real market. The tariffs you're seeing now, the trade restrictions, the political pressure to buy domestic, the emergency subsidies for Western battery plants, these aren't signs of strength. They're signs of a rude awakening. When governments start frantically building walls around an industry, it almost always means the open field has already been lost. And here is what makes this moment genuinely irreversible. BYD's advantages aren't subsidies you can simply match with a bigger government check. They're built on 2 decades of compounding technological development, manufacturing discipline, and vertical integration that cannot be reverse-engineered quickly. You cannot copy a supply chain in 3 years. You cannot manufacture battery chemistry expertise out of thin air. You cannot conjure the institutional knowledge that comes from building millions of vehicles and iterating relentlessly on every single component you control. Wang Chuanfu started with a borrowed $300,000 and an obsession with how energy moves. He built a battery company when no one was watching. He built a car company when everyone was laughing. He built a global industrial force when everyone else was busy worshiping a different founder on a different stage. Tesla didn't lose the top spot because it stopped innovating. It lost because BYD never stopped either. And BYD was playing a longer, quieter, more patient game than anyone in Silicon Valley ever thought possible. The dream got built, and the whole world is driving it now.